I have a ramen problem. I have way too much instant ramen, especially for one person. Although, to be fair, this is way less than the amount I had last year. What should I do with all these packages? Well, let's get started on my third annual 30-day instant ramen challenge. If you're new here, each of the days I'm going to try to come up with a new ramen dish utilizing these packages. Also, this year I'll be partnering with a local nonprofit to bring awareness to the great things they're doing for the community. I'll share more information in an upcoming video. I've met some incredible people this past year, and they've all been nice enough to share cooking tips with me. I'm going to use what I've learned to see what I can come up with in this challenge. I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch what I did before, because honestly, I don't remember all 60 different things I did. And if you have any recommendations on what I should try, please let me know. It's gonna be a fun one. I can already feel it. Today is day 1 of my ramen challenge, and I'm going to try my friend Julius's recipe that he did for the ramen collab earlier this year. It's a spicy, cheesy, eggy ramen. The first thing I'm doing is cubing up some Spam and pan frying it so it's nice and crispy. He adds about a spoonful of cream cheese along with a couple of slices of American cheese. Next up, I'm acquiring an egg yolk. I was going to use the eggshell, but then I was scared it was going to puncture it, so I used my hands. The noodles used in this recipe is the spicy Shin ramen. Cooked it in 10 ounces of water and then added the seasonings. Add the noodles to the cheese and mix well. Then throw in the Spam to get sauced up. Last touch is the green onions. So he added sesame seeds to his, but I cannot find mine at all. I think Jaden hid them somewhere. This was deliciously creamy. The cheese cut down the spice a little bit, but there's still quite a kick at the end. I think the only change I would make for my personal preference is to use less of the seasoning packet because of the saltiness, but this was really solid. Big thank you to Julius for the recipe. Today is day 2 of my ramen challenge, and some of my friends are in town, so I decided to make a build your own instant ramen station. I didn't want to wreck their stomachs, so I provided a mix of mild and spicy ramens for them to choose from. It was also brunch time, so I made a mimosa and coffee station for them to enjoy while I cooked the toppings. You'll have to let me know which bowl you think looks the best at the end. The first topping I made was bacon, pretty straightforward and a typical brunch food here in the States. I'm also chopping up some green onions, and to add a bit of crunch, I'm boiling bean sprouts. They don't add much taste to the ramen, but I like the extra texture change. While that's cooking, I'm getting a big pot of water heated up so my friends can cook their instant noodles. They've never tried American cheese in their ramen before, so I thought it would be a great time to introduce them to the option. In the bacon fat, I'm frying up some sausages since it's another classic breakfast item. Now, this smoked salmon was a last-minute decision that I started to regret when I plated it. It just didn't look like it would go that well in the noodles, but since I already bought it, I thought, oh well. Next, I'm boiling some frozen chicken and cabbage dumplings. I threw in more bacon because I started to overthink and worry about someone maybe wanting more than one slice and I wouldn't have enough. I got out a bunch of different bowls and they all chose their packages. Last thing was just frying up the eggs. So we got crispy bacon, smoked salmon, sausages, dumplings, green onions, American cheese, fried eggs, bean sprouts, and chili oil. Gotta make sure you provide both forks and chopsticks as well. Next was the fun part, watching all my friends assemble their bowls. Bowl number 1. Bowl number 2. Pretty solid. Bowl number 3. This is Holly's.
Vote for me.
Bowl number 4. I went for the Momofuku spicy soy noodles with a fried egg, bacon, dumpling, sausage, bean sprouts, green onions, smoked salmon, and I almost forgot the chili oil. I had a ton of fun making this for my friends and I'll most likely do it again. The smoked salmon ended up working out, and Holly even added a second slice of cheese to her ramen. Second one?
Yeah, it's so good. I don't even like this kind of cheese usually.
Today is day 3 of my ramen challenge, and if you know me, you know that I love loaded baked potatoes. So I'm going to create a ramen loaded baked potato inspired by hot potato bar. I washed the potatoes and threw them in the air fryer for 20 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. While that is cooking, I'm chopping up some chives. My plan is to make a typical loaded baked potato since it's my first time making one with ramen. So I'm also adding some crispy bacon. Then I've got a block of cheese that I'm shredding because they add a ton of mozzarella in the loaded baked potato videos. I only aged a couple of years this time shredding the cheese. From my ramen stash, I'm going to use the first noodles I grabbed, which are these ones that I bought in a grocery store in Barcelona. Not sure what the flavor is, but looks like it would go well with the cheesy potato. Inside, we have a liquid packet and a dried veggies and seasoning packet. After 20 minutes, I checked on the doneness of the potatoes and the fork hardly went through, so I added 10 minutes. While patiently waiting, I cooked the noodles, which fared pretty well in the packaging considering they flew back from Spain with me. I drained the nudes and added both of the packets in. Noodles were done and time to check on the potatoes. So I just realized that I was supposed to poke holes in the beginning. I feel like I'm pretty freaking lucky that things didn't explode. After 35 total minutes, the fork went through the potato, so I thought it was done. It was in fact not done, so I had to put it back in the air fryer for 6 minutes. Luckily, I baked a second potato, and I'll just have to figure out what to do with the first one. I sliced the potato and then scooped the inside out, kind of breaking it. Then I added salt and pepper and gave it a good mix, continuing to break down the insides. A nice pat of butter and a ton of mozzarella. I gently mixed everything so I wouldn't puncture the potato skin. Just patiently worked my way around. Then I made a little bed for the noodles, which have since dried because I didn't time it right and didn't expect the potatoes to take so long to cook. I added the bacon, some more cheese, and then put the baby back into the air fryer for 3 minutes, which was a mistake because then it made the noodles extra dry and crispy, which I didn't want. A few dollops of sour cream and a little spread action so it doesn't look like my cat's turds, a sprinkle of chives, and there you have it, a ramen loaded baked potato. I wasn't quite sure how to eat this, but I definitely know it's not with chopsticks, so I just picked it up and took a bite. It was good. I mean, you can't go wrong with potato, butter, and cheese topped with ramen and bacon, but it could be much better. If I do this again, I wouldn't put it back in the second time so the noodles stay wet, and I think it would meld better with the creamy texture of the potato. If you made this, how would you top it? Today is day 3.5 of my ramen challenge, and yep, I'm doing a half day. I just slept on this and thought, man, I've been thinking about executing this for a while, and I was really sad that it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So I got 2 new potatoes and stuck it in the air fryer for 40 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't worry, I remembered to poke holes in them this time. Chopped up some more chives and shredded more cheese. I'm out of bacon today, so I'm replacing them with this charcuterie meat left over from when my friends were in town. I chopped up the salami into small bits and tossed them into a pan to get crispy. For the noodles, I'm using the spicy cream carbonara noodles. Haven't tried this flavor yet, so this will be fun. Let's just ignore the fact that I don't know how to check the deadness of potatoes. Luckily, I had the long and skinny one as backup. Scoop the insides, salt, pepper, mix, butter, mozzarella, mix, make a bed, add the noodles, sour cream, meat, and chives. This was everything I hoped it would be. Spicy, creamy, cheesy goodness. Definitely in the top 10 tastiest things I've ever made. Today is day 4 of my ramen challenge, and it's going to be a pretty simple one. I've got some jumbo scallops in the freezer that I'm thawing and patting dry with a paper towel. For the noodles, I'm using the stir-fried cheese ramen package, which honestly, I don't remember when I picked it up. There's a good chance I got it while I was in Thailand, but I'm not going to remember until I start editing the footage. I'm seasoning the scallops with a little bit of salt, pepper, and the cheese powder. Not sure if it will be enough to taste on the scallops, but it's worth a try. Into a hot oiled pan it goes, and I had to watch each one carefully since they were all different sizes and some cooked quicker than others. Set the scallops off to the side and then cook the noodles. These are pretty easy since there's just one packet. Slice of American cheese in the center and then the scallops all around. One in the center, maybe? No? Yes. Yes. Felt like it needed some color, so I sprinkled some furikake over the top. This was so cheesy and so delicious. The mild scallops were the perfect pairing. Today is day 5 of my ramen challenge, and it was a pretty last minute one. My friend James was dropping off some of his hot honey chili oil, and I asked him what it would go well on. He suggested fried chicken, and it reminded me of the chicken wings I have in my freezer. I got it because it was on sale. I pat the wings dry and added some sesame oil along with 2 shots of fish sauce. It was only supposed to be a couple of squirts. I rubbed it in until it was nice and coated, then I prepared a dry rub. The rub is made of 3 packets of the Shin Ramen spicy seasoning, a tablespoon of garlic powder, half teaspoon baking soda, 1 teaspoon MSG, 1 teaspoon of white pepper, and 1 teaspoon of paprika. So my plan was to coat 1 wing at a time in the dry rub, but then I realized it was just way too much seasoning, so I threw in the rest of the wings and tossed it for 30 days and nights until each one was well coated. I let that sit in the seasonings for 2 hours. I don't want to start frying yet in the challenge because then I'll fry for a few days straight while I figure out how to reuse the oil. So I'm pulling out the air fryer. I put them in for 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes and then flipped them to continue cooking for another 10 minutes. They were already looking quite crispy. I wanted to do something with the noodles, so I cooked them up and tossed them in James's chili oil along with some fresh garlic, a little bit of soy sauce, a little bit of green onions, a couple of toss attempts, and they didn't look too bad. And I'm really happy with how the wings looked. Added some hot honey to the wings, which was the thing that got me here in the first place. I tried the noodles, which got a little dry because I had a little photo shoot with the plating. I mean, doesn't it look good? The noodles were tasty, but the wings were on a whole nother level. You can't distinctively tell the taste of the Shin Ramen seasoning, but it was spicy and flavorful for sure. Crispy skin and moist meat, spicy meat sweetness from the honey. The wingtips are the best bit. because you can just bite them off and they're so crispy. Today is day 6 of my ramen challenge, and I'm making something I had the pleasure of trying in East Harlem earlier this year, the chopped cheese. Obviously, I'm making it with instant ramen since this is a ramen challenge after all. I'm going to be using these teriyaki beef stir-fry noodles since I think their flavor would go well in the meat. Speaking of meat, I'll be using this red Wagyu ground beef I got earlier this year at the farmer's market. It's been chilling in my freezer waiting for its moment to shine. Since this is put together pretty quickly towards the end, I'm just making sure I prep all my ingredients so I don't freak out later. First is thinly slicing some tomatoes. Took me a few tries, but then I got the slices I think will work. Next is slicing up the lettuce. Okay, side note, but when did lettuce get so expensive? This thing was $3.99. I guess I just don't buy lettuce enough to notice, but holy smokes. I saved the onion for last because 1, I cry like a baby when cutting them, and 2, I know from watching the OGs make the chopped cheese that it needs to be sliced very thinly, and I've always wondered what this side on the grater cut like, so I'm going to try the onion on it. Alright, abort mission. It just hacked the onion and squirted the juices straight into my face. I tried my best to thinly slice the onion and moved on to the next step. So you're supposed to use hoagie rolls, but I didn't know they would be ridiculously hard to find, so I'm using these sub rolls. I sliced them about 98% of the way, and into the air fryer for 3 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to go ahead and cook the noodles, but I don't want to cook them all the way through or else they'll get mushy when I chop them into the meat. I let it cook for a couple of minutes and then drained them. For the ideal bread, I would have toasted this while cooking the meat, but when it's only me and I gotta film and cook and make sure my cat stays alive, I just gotta prep this ahead of time. It'll lose a bit of its integrity, but it is what it is. I spread the mayo and drizzled some ketchup onto the bread, spread it all over, and then it was time to finally start cooking. Oil into my carbon steel skillet on just above medium heat, toss in the onions and season with garlic powder and adobo seasoning, also some pepper and salt. Then I tried to start chopping, but it just didn't make sense with the big spatula thingy, especially since I didn't have the flat top to do this all on. It took me a while to get the hang of it, but once I did, I got into a little groove. Also, don't wear any nice clothes while doing this because the spatter gets everywhere. The meat is a little bit fattier, so it should add some good flavor. Next, I added some more adobo seasoning and then threw in the noodles. Then I just continued chopping my life away. It's a therapeutic process. My goal was to just not mush up the noodles. I brought in the sub for scale and then added a couple slices of American cheese. Man, watching this back, this was a stressful moment. I had to figure out how to get it all onto the spatula without it breaking apart. Hopefully the hot meat doesn't touch my hand. A couple of tomato slices and the shredded lettuce and rolled it up in parchment paper like they do at the bodega. I mean, that looks pretty dang good to me. The tomato could be better placed so it doesn't slip out, but man, this was good. It was like a super powered cheeseburger that had slight notes of the sweetness from the teriyaki noodles. And even though the bread wasn't toasty, it was 2 beautiful pillows of fluffiness holding the goodness together. This is my favorite day so far. Maybe out of the whole entire challenge. Today is day 7 of my instant ramen challenge, and I will be trying Vegemite ramen. This recipe was sent to me from Jack on Instagram. Said this was their mom's recipe. They suggested that I use a chicken flavored ramen and to cook it per the package's instructions. Right before it's done cooking, turn off the heat and stir in 1 egg. I've been struggling with my egg cracking skills lately. And then add 1 teaspoon of Vegemite. Mix the Vegemite well into the noodle broth, and then for the last ingredient, cream of corn. I added a couple of spoons of it and also mixed it in. I can't say that I've ever prepared cream of corn at home before. This will be interesting in the ramen. First of all, it looked and smelled great. I tried the broth by itself first and it had terrific flavor, similar to adding soy sauce to a soup, but more mellow. I didn't know what to expect with this combo, but I love it. The Vegemite adds extra flavoring and the corn extra crunch. I'm going to start adding Vegemite to my soups. With these few tweaks, it really leveled up simple instant ramen. Today is day 8 of my ramen challenge, and it's not what I planned it to be. I was exchanging food with my neighbor and we got to talking for a lot longer than expected, so I'm whipping together something quickly to make it in time to post today. I sliced some red onion I have in my fridge, and I'm using the Shin ramen noodles I have left over from making the air fryer chicken wings. I stood in front of my pantry and fridge long enough to think of this combo. Will it work? We'll see. Peanut butter, chili garlic sauce, and chili crisp vinaigrette from Fly by Jing. I'm hoping it's a tangy, savory mix. Adding some boiling water to the mix and then cooking the noodles. Mixture is whisked and the noodles are drained. The heat is on medium-high while I stir in the sauce. Shout out to my neighbor for the smoked chicken and chili oil sausage. Going to add this bad boy to my ramen bowl cause why not? Red onion, sausage, and guess what? I found my sesame seeds. I keep forgetting they're in a different jar. So I gave it a try, and to me, the noodles were good but need more flavoring. Maybe soy sauce or some salty element. Luckily, the sausage helped with that. The red onion was a nice crunch, but it didn't add much to the bowl. I would make this again, but with some minor tweaks. Today is day 8.5 of my ramen ramen challenge, and I'm making yesterday's peanut butter ramen with a few tweaks. So I've got peanut butter, chili garlic sauce, chili crisp vinaigrette, which I shook the bottle a bit more to get the crisp parts, and I'm introducing a fourth character, Vegemite. Yesterday I was just missing that salty umami taste that I think this will fix. I'm just adding about a teaspoon. I'm using the last open Shin ramen package I have from day 5, stealing a couple of spoonfuls of boiling water and then cooking the noodles. Whisk the mix and drain the noodles. Add sauce and mix. Smells the same as yesterday, but it's slightly darker. Lucky me, my neighbor gave me 2 chicken chili oil sausages, sliced into this thick one and threw it onto the noodles. Next, I 86'd the red onions and replaced it with a fried egg cause I wanted to. Isn't it cool how the egg fit perfectly?
That was intentional, of course.
Lastly, I sprinkled furikake instead of sesame seeds for a subtle hint of sweet and salty. This was way better than yesterday's. All it needed was a little more saltiness, and the Vegemite helped with that. Also, the crispy fried egg added a nice texture change. Today is day 9 of my ramen challenge, and I'm packing up some stuff to go try a highly requested combo, ramen and ice cream. A restaurant in Japan went viral for it earlier this year when they were serving ice cream with their spicy miso. I don't have any ice cream at home or spicy miso ramen, so I'm taking some stuff with me to eat in my car. Lucky me, the store didn't have a single instant ramen package that was spicy miso flavored, so I went to the miso section thinking I can add some of that flavoring to some of the instant ramen, and they had this tofu shirataki ramen, so I'm just going to use the paste packets and mix it with this tonkatsu bowl. I found a legit parking spot near the ice cream shop, paid for the parking, and then it was time to whip out my goodies. If you don't have a car tray, you're missing out.
There's a guy putting change in the meter next to me, and he's eyeing what I'm doing. Oh boy. Putting a lot of trust into this car tray right now.
First, I mixed the spicy miso paste with some hot water. Yes, I also brought a bowl and chopsticks. You gotta come prepared for car dining. Just me making ramen in my car while the streetcar goes by. I'll have to save these packages for another time. I'm sure I'll figure out something to do with them. Poured the mixture in along with some hot water, then closing the lid and setting the chopsticks on top. I had to carefully get out of my car so I wouldn't upend the entire thing.
Hopefully no one breaks into my car and takes my instant ramen.
A little stroll to the ice cream shop to acquire the vanilla ice cream cone, and man did I want to try all the flavors, but I did not have the time.
Alright, ice cream is acquired, but I think he gave me an extra scoop, so I guess just more for the ramen.
Good news, no one broke into my car for the ramen.
Alright, that didn't take as long as expected. I think this is still cooking, so I guess I just gotta eat some. That is some good ice cream.
I knew the ice cream cone wouldn't fit in this bowl, so I transferred it over to mine. I don't know if I'll ever say this again, but I made a little noodle bed for the ice cream. Also packed an egg, of course, along with the only knife I have a sheath for. And alright, it's time for the ice cream. I'm just following along to the picture I saw posted on the restaurant's social media page, so please don't come at me. I'm already getting enough angry comments from this challenge. I didn't really know how to eat this. Should I wait for all the ice cream to melt? Should I alternate bites? I just went for the noodles first and spooned some of the broth over the ice cream.
It's just making the broth like less intense, more creamy, nothing crazy. It's not bad, I'll say that now. I haven't finished it, but it's not bad. When you get the noodles close to here, you get like this little cold burst.
I think this works. The combo of spicy and dairy is something that a lot of people already combine. This is just a slower release method.
This is the part that I don't get, that I don't think I would, well, we'll try it for science.
The only thing I didn't like was the sogginess of the cone. The texture threw me off. But when you take a bite out of the whole cone, it really got that sweet and savory combo that I like with the crunch factor. Would you try this? Today is day 10 of my ramen challenge, and I'm making ramen buns, but differently than I've done in the past. I've always steamed them, and a bunch of people have asked me why I don't bake them, so let's give it a try today. First, I'm prepping all the fillings. The quail eggs I'm cooking for 2.5 minutes. They take a while to peel, but it's worth it. I also decided to add a meat element, which will be this pork sausage. It's convenient when it comes in this tube, because you can just slice them straight into patties. These will be the base of the filling. I've done a version with egg as the base, and the circle shape helped ensure that there was some egg in each bite. For the noodles, I'm using these rosé noodles. I haven't tried this flavor yet. Also, there's a couple of new additions to my ramen stash. I saw them at the store and couldn't resist. There was supposed to be a transition there, but I forgot. My bad. And I tried a bit of the noodles, not quite sure what the flavor is supposed to be. The only thing I know about rosé is that Holly likes to drink it. It's not as spicy as their regular version, but it was much sweeter. If you've tried it, let me know what you think of it. Got my biscuit dough container opened without any casualties, rolled it out, and started adding in the fillings. Sausage patty, quail egg, and noodles. Then just worked my way around, making sure to seal it tightly so it doesn't open as it bakes. I haven't done this in a while, so it took me a moment to remember the movements.
I just remembered I was going to add cheese to all of these, and totally forgot.
So to save y'all some time, I put these in the oven initially for 11 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, but total time ended up being 24 minutes. They looked good to me. You could leave it in longer if you want more of a golden brown. This one is a bit messed up because of my folding job, and they were delicious. By baking them, you get the flaky texture of the biscuit. You also taste more of the saltiness in this version. I like both ways equally as much. The one that I put the cheese in was a bit larger than the others, so it wasn't fully cooked. I just threw it back in the oven for a bit. My favorite part about ramen buns is that you can eat them anywhere. I'm just chilling on the couch enjoying it while I'm looking at my amazing Christmas wrapping skills. Today is day 10 and a half of my instant ramen challenge, and I saved a few uncooked ramen buns from yesterday. I'm going to fry them and see how they turn out. I left these uncovered in the fridge so the outside could dry as much as possible. The bottom part is still a little wet. I just flipped them over so it could dry a bit while I heat up the oil. Oil got to 355 degrees Fahrenheit, and I gently placed the buns in one by one. So far, so good. I don't really like frying things because many things can go badly very quickly. These turned brown in less than a couple of minutes. I took one out and let the others cook, and then I decided to put the other one back in since I wanted to make sure the inside was cooked. I also flipped them over to get the top a bit since it looked white. Then the color looked great, so I went ahead and took them all out. I was thinking, wow, this was so easy to do, but then I broke one apart.
No!
I didn't want to put it back in the oil because the oil would have seeped into the bun, so I put them in the air fryer for 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 minutes. Still not done, so back in for another 6 minutes. I was getting impatient, but whatever. I had games to play while I was waiting. Buns were finally done, and I like this method. As much as I don't enjoy frying, these still turned out great. These were even crispier than yesterday's version while staying slightly fluffy. So I've tried steaming, baking, and frying. I think it just depends on the texture you're in the mood for if you're trying to decide between the cooking methods. Today is day 11 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm using some leftover rice to make crispy rice and ramen. I'm mixing the rice with the leftover black garlic oil from day 9, laying down some saran wrap in a small bowl since I don't have much rice. First layer down and patting it in. Since I enjoy nori, I decided to cut out a circle and add that before cooking the noodles, which are these Japanese style cold noodles. It comes with a sesame flavored sauce and mustard. I think I got these in a grocery store in Hawaii, but I don't remember. Once the noodles were cooked and drained, I added them to the bowl. I'm glad it was sticky because it helped make the rice stick to it. I just pressed the rice down as much as I could, covered it, and then stuck it in the fridge for 5 hours. I also stuck it in the freezer for like 20 minutes because it was looking fragile. I wasn't even going to try and pick it up. Used some oil from cooking my ramen buns and just going to shallow fry these. It was starting to crumble, which sucked, but the show must go on. First flip was scary, and it was also when I realized the oil temp dropped a ton since the rice and ramen were straight from the freezer. So I upped the heat and just fried it until it turned crispy. It lost a lot of rice, but the ramen and nori stayed pretty intact. I'm using the sesame sauce to top it off for some flavor, as well as some of this mustard. It was definitely not the best looking, but it was crispy, and the best thing about it was the texture, just pure crunch throughout. The downside was the mustard for me. It left an interesting aftertaste that I didn't really like, so I would just not add that the next time. I'm happy with how it turned out, although I would have liked for the rice to stay together better. Also my first time making crispy rice, so I can't wait to experiment some more with that. Today is day 12 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm making hot pot for one. I just came home from Christmas gift shopping in an outdoor market, and I can't shake the cold seeping through my bones, so hopefully spicy hot pot will fix me up. I'm just using the noodles from the habanero lime package since they're nice and sturdy. Going to use the sauce as a dipping sauce. I've got a plate of green onion, tomato, enoki mushroom, and white onion. Second plate has an assortment of fish cakes and an egg. Last plate has thinly sliced beef and a few chicken and cabbage dumplings. Add some kimchi to round it all out. I've got this spicy hot oil block to use. Tossed in the green onion and added some water. Next was just putting everything else in. Also put in the dried veggie packet. This was enough food for 2, but I was feeling antisocial and wanted a chill Sunday. It was also pretty quick to put together, and it definitely warmed me up. Next time I'll probably add some napa cabbage and bok choy for some crunch and sweetness. What would you have added? Today is day 13 of my instant ramen challenge, and I've got leftover hot pot ingredients from yesterday, so I'm cutting them up and I plan to stir fry it. For the noodles, I'm using these cup noodles that I got from James. It's rice with noodles, General Tso's chicken flavor. Pretty cool how it has the rice in there along with broken up noodles. Also looks like quite a bit of seasoning. I'm going to add the enoki mushrooms to the cup so it can cook for a little bit along with the rice and noodles. I bought this mini wok for myself just recently while gift shopping. Added some oil to it once it got really hot. I had a shallot that has been laying laying around, so I thought I could just toss it in and stir it quickly enough for it not to burn. Dumped some of the oil out since I put too much, added a couple of crushed garlics, and tossed in the leftover fish cakes. The sliced shallot started burning, so I removed it as I went. I just want to take a moment and mention that all the wok tossing you see is done with my left hand, which is my non-dominant one. Just wanted to put that out there. I removed that from the heat, added oil, and then tossed in the thin slices of beef. Once it got a nice color, I took it out of the pan, seafood mix back in along with the cooked noodles and rice. I had planned to add some soy sauce, but after looking at this, I decided not to. Tossed that around the wok for about a minute and then poured the beef back in. Garnished with green onions, and this was my favorite day so far. Everything just melded really well together. The seasoning was sweet and savory and just enough to flavor the meats and mushroom without being overpowering. I filmed this pretty late at night, which I don't like to do because I prefer not to go to bed with a full stomach, but I ate this entire thing. Today is day 14 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm making ramen trail mix. Fried up some chicharrones, which I still have left over from my videos earlier this year. For the noodles, I'm using these chili and lime flavored ones. I haven't tried them yet, but the purple wheat noodles have me intrigued. I added the seasoning oil to the fried bits first, tossed them, and then added half of the seasoning packet. Toss, and then I broke up the noodles. I'm going to have to try these on their own sometime since the flavor just sounds good. I threw in some wasabi soy sauce flavored cashews that Holly's dad got me, along with some wasabi beans. Also had some kettle popcorn and spicy cinnamon toast crunch. If you're wondering if I'm clearing out stuff from my pantry, the answer is yes. And of course you have to have M&Ms. I put in the rest of the seasoning packet, and I didn't really have crazy expectations for this, but it actually turned out really good. It was the right mix of sweet and salty, and it provided a lot of different textures. The seasoning powder was a slight sour and spicy, and it complemented everything. I ate like half of this while finishing up the latest TV show I'm watching. Today is day 14 and a half of my ramen challenge, and apparently I got a lot of people riled up in the comments from what I made yesterday. I guess it was crap and not good food, and I should stop the BS. So I'm issuing an apology, and I'm recreating the trail mix I made with a minor change. Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking. I can't believe I didn't use peanut M&Ms. Hopefully you all can forgive me. Today is day 15 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try and make ramen chips with crab rangoon dip. I'm combining a couple of things I did last year, but of course trying to make it better. First, I'm blitzing these pancit canton hot chili noodles to make the flour tortillas. Last year, I had big bits of the ramen in the mix, so I'm making sure to blitz for extra long this time. And I still have the measurements from last year that I'm going to follow. 113 grams of all-purpose flour, 48 grams of the ramen dust, 21 grams of Wagyu fat, shout out to my brother for the Wagyu, and a sprinkle of salt. I gotta remember to mix the dry ingredients before adding the wet. I'm using the dough hook on my stand mixer for this and just taking my time. Adding warm water until it looks like it becomes the right consistency. I had to stop about 5 times to scrape the sides, but this turned out pretty good. For some reason, it was a lot less scary than last year. The texture was different as well. This time it was more moist and it was spongier. I placed that in a bowl, covered it, and then went to make my crab rangoon dip. Whipped cream cheese, garlic, green onions, crab meat. So I usually use the imitation crab, but I thought, what the heck, it's an instant ramen challenge, let's splurge a little bit. Some salt, black pepper, sweet chili sauce, and shredded cheese. I mixed that up and then put it into this pie pan. Spread it around evenly, and then topped it with some more cheese. I set that to the side and went back to my ramen flour ball. Cut it into quarters, rolled it into a ball, and used a rolling pin to flatten it out. And I know I keep saying this, but man, it looks so much better than last year's. Next was just cutting it into triangles using my pizza cutter. I'm going to air fry these since I've had some success with air frying tortillas. Sprayed the bottom, laid the ramen chips down, and then sprayed the top. Put the crab rangoon dip in the oven for 15 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and the chips go into the air fryer for 5 minutes at 380. I felt like that was conservative enough. So they definitely cooked, but they looked more like pita than chips, so I'm upping the temp to 400 for 3 minutes after flipping each one. They looked much better after that. I tossed them in the ramen seasoning packet, which at that point I realized it probably would have been better to add it before cooking the chips, so it could have stuck better. Added some final touches to the dip so it didn't look naked, and it was time to give it a try. Good news, the chip was strong enough to scoop a chunk of the dip, and it had a crunch to it, which was exactly what I was looking for. It's got substance to it, and I had trust in it that it wasn't going to break. Taste-wise, it wasn't the best. You could taste the instant ramen dry noodle, and that's not always the best taste. But the experiment worked, and I'm happy with how it turned out. I could also crush these up and sprinkle them over the top now that I think about it. Today is day 16 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to make ramen nachos, like the overly salty, crunchy nacho cheese ones you get at the movie theaters. I'm just rolling out the leftover ramen dough ball that I have from making the chips, making it as thin as I can. And this shot glass is the only thing I could find that had the circular nacho shape. It actually ended up working out quite well. From the scrap dough, I was able to roll it out and get some more. Then I heated up some oil and gently placed them in. The oil was a little bit too hot, so I lowered it, and as these chips puffed up, they reminded me of sopapillas. For a moment, I was going to scratch the ramen nachos idea and just toss this in some cinnamon sugar, but I just went with the original plan since I already had the nacho cheese. The second batch of chips definitely looked better since I had the oil temped down. While I was heating up the cheese, I tossed the chips in salt. They don't look like the movie theater ones, but hey, they don't look too bad. Poured some of the glorious cheese over them and then topped with some homemade pickled jalapenos that my neighbor brought over. Although these didn't taste like the movie theater version, they were still really good. Frying them removed most of the instant ramen flavoring, but left just enough to provide the extra flavor that the flour needed. Today is day 17 of my instant ramen challenge, and it didn't turn out the way I thought it would. My game plan was to make stir-fry ramen with a slice of smoked brisket along with steamed veggies. I wanted to make some meals to hand out to people in downtown Kansas City who wanted a warm meal. Unfortunately, I haven't unlocked the skills needed yet to cook big batches of ramen noodles. I overcooked them and they turned to mush, and I wasn't going to serve that to anyone. I already had a whole brisket, so I had to figure out what to do. I shifted the game plan and decided to make chopped brisket sandwiches along with mac and cheese. Also found some small bags of snacks, things I was able to gather quickly at a small store. It was one of those I fudged up, but I'm going to figure out how to fix it moments. Slight panic, slight pissed at yourself moments. But with the help of my amazing neighbor, we were able to crank out 20 meals. We drove around and handed them out, and when we got back, I made some ramen noodles to warm up. Original game plan didn't work out, but still accomplished the goal. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday. Today is day 18 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try and make a ramen crunch wrap. I don't think I've even had one from Taco Bell yet, but I watched a video on their page showing how it's made. I'm going to be using spicy noodles since that seems like it would be a good match. Browning a pound of ground beef and then adding Taco Bell seasoning. The instructions said to add some water and let that simmer for 10 minutes. While that's happening, I'm heating up some of their jarred nacho cheese that I found from the store. This will end up being the base for the wrap. The meat is looking great, so I'm going to move on and cook the noodles. Drained the noodles and then added the packets in. I had everything ready and it was just time to assemble. I microwaved this giant flour tortilla for 20 seconds to make it easier to work with. Seems like a decent amount of cheese. Then I added the seasoned ground beef. Noodles were next and I just made a nice little bed for them. Add the tostada and then a little pat on the back for sizing everything correctly. Sour cream and lettuce, and yes, I know the lettuce is looking a bit limp, but man, lettuce lasts like 2 seconds in the fridge. And the last thing are some diced tomatoes. I started closing the wrap and realized that it may not close entirely. And as much as I tried, I wasn't able to. And I stopped messing around with it because I didn't want the tortilla to rip. Just placed it on medium heat on a nonstick skillet and got it a little toasty on both sides. Cut into it, and this is how it turned out.
Oh, look at that.
It was a great combo of ingredients. Although the cheese added a bit too much saltiness for me, the sour cream and lettuce helped cut that down. Spicy noodles and meat were delicious as well. I do think it would be better with a cheesy or creamier noodle though. How do you think this turned out? Today is day 18 and a half of my instant ramen challenge, and since I still have all the ingredients to make a crunch wrap, I thought let's make another one, this time with a couple of changes. First change is that I'm going to use the cream carbonara noodles. I wanted the noodles from yesterday to be a little bit saucier and cheesier. These also have a nice kick to them that I like. Microwave the tortilla for 20 seconds, and the second change I'm making is that I'm removing the nacho cheese. It just added too much saltiness to the mix, and I think the noodles will help balance the wrap better. So the noodles will be the base of this one, and then the seasoned ground beef. Tostada, shredded lettuce, which isn't looking much better than yesterday.
Oh my.
2 shots of sour cream, which should have come before the lettuce, but I messed up. Diced tomatoes, and time to wrap. I covered the bit of sour cream with tomato so it wouldn't spill out while I toasted it in the pan. Personally, I think this cross section looks better than yesterday's, but let me know what you think. And it was good. Great texture and flavor, but it was just missing something, and that was hot sauce, which tied it all together. I'll definitely be making these again. Today is day 19 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try cup noodles during a flight. I've seen instant noodles do this and wanted to give it a try. I'm heading home from a foodie city, which I'll be sharing the experience soon. Once we got stable in the air, I asked for some hot water and poured it in. It wasn't enough to cover the noodles, but I pressed down on it until it got submerged. While I was waiting at the airport, I picked up this barbecue since ramen and meat is one of my favorite combos. Noodles were done, and I had the sausage with it, the brisket, and some pulled pork, just alternating between the meats. It was a good comfort meal to have, and I considered making a noodle sandwich, but decided against it since I didn't want to make a mess. And 10 out of 10, I would recommend this experience. Today is day 20 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to attempt to make ramen candy corn Butterfinger donuts. Yes, that's a mouthful of seemingly random ingredients, but bear with me here. First, I chose these snack ramen noodles because they were already mostly broken up. I blitzed the noodles and added them to melted butter. Last year, I had trouble when I was trying to make a similar crust for a chocolate chip cookie pizza, so this year I'm adding some sugar, aka candy corn, to see if that helps it bind. Mixed that all up and added it to the baking sheet, patted it down, and threw it in the oven for 10 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. These are leftover candy corn from a video I filmed showing the texture of the candy. Someone had commented that it's possible to make Butterfingers from it, which is how I got this idea. I'm adding some peanut butter while letting the candy corn melt down. As I was mixing it, I just felt like I was doing some type of science experiment. I checked on the ramen crumble thingy I had going on, and it didn't seem to bake at all, so I left it in for 5 more minutes. Then I started placing the candy corn peanut butter mixture into a donut mold. My plan is to shape the crumble into a circle so it can be the crunch in the donut. When I pulled the crumble out of the oven, it looked baked, but it wasn't. I'm still missing something here to make it hard, but I'm just moving on because the candy mixture was getting cold and I needed it to stay malleable. I broke up the ramen crumble and I'm just going to layer it over the top of what I have now in the mold, and then over the top of that I put the rest of the candy corn mixture. I was getting more and more skeptical of this working out as I progressed through the steps. I plopped it into the freezer for a couple of hours and then started working on a chocolate dip. Melted some chocolate chips by microwaving in 15-second intervals. Took the donut out of the mold and dropped it into the chocolate, and I don't know why, but I started cracking up when I saw the chocolate bit in the center come up like that. Using a fork, I just flipped it and made sure it was all covered in chocolate, using a handy dandy chopstick to pick it up and place it on the parchment paper. Then I just continued the process for the rest of the donuts. The last 2 weren't as pretty because the chocolate started getting cold. Also, RIP to my chopstick, your sacrifice will not be forgotten. I let them sit out for a while since they were still pretty hard and I didn't want my teeth to break like the chopstick. I was able to wait about 30 minutes before I started getting impatient. I broke apart one to see what we're working with. Not bad, but that's a lot of chocolate. It's like a brick of thick chocolate candy and it tastes like Butterfinger. It was harder than I would have liked it, so I think next time I will up the peanut butter quantity and let it sit out for at least an hour. The taste was good. Lots of chocolate, sugar, and peanut butter. The ramen crust didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, and I mostly tasted the butter from that layer, but overall, it was still edible. Today is day 21 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm making hangover ramen. No, I'm not hungover, but I have a guess that there are some people feeling it today. Call it a hunch. I'm cooking some of the leftover ramen noodles I have from my fail on Christmas Day. These only take a few minutes in boiling water. Then for the broth, I'm using the spicy miso packet I have from the ice cream day. I still have that shirataki noodles to use, and I have an idea that I'll try next week. I'm just mixing that in with boiling water and garlic cloves. If I were hungover, I would want it extra spicy so I could sweat, so I'm adding a couple of spoonfuls of chili oil, adding half of the broth, then the drained and rinsed noodles, a little more broth, a fried egg, and I have some leftover steak in the fridge that I sliced up. Kimchi, nori, green onions, furikake, and the rest of the broth. All these ingredients were just leftovers or they were just in my pantry, and here they are combined. If you're hungover, I feel ya. Drink a ton of water, make some instant ramen, and get some rest. Today is day 22 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try and make ramen potato mochi pancakes using the ramen I overcooked on Christmas Day. I threw the noodles in the freezer and took them out last night after I figured out what I wanted to do with them. I cut them up because I think they'll be easier to work with. I've also got the tonkatsu flavoring packet from the ice cream day, and here's the sweet rice flour that I used last year for the potato mochi pancakes. While I've got a few potatoes microwaving, I'm dissolving the flavoring packet in some warm water. Then I peeled the potato skins off very hot potatoes. Probably could have waited for them to cool down a bit. Next step was just mashing the potatoes until my hand cramped. I still have the potato ricer I bought last year in its box. I'm just scared it'll take a long time to clean, so this method will have to do. I added some of the rice flour and I didn't really measure, but I wanted it to have a dough-like consistency. Mixed it and then added the flavoring packet mixture. Mixed some more until my hand begged me to stop. I rolled it into a ball, flattened it, and then added the noodles. I wasn't sure if this was going to work, but sounded good in my head. Just wrapped the potato mixture around the noodles. I made 3 so I can mess up twice if I need to. Is this foreshadowing? No, not at all, because I never mess up. I flattened each one out with my burger smasher, which reminds me I'd like to do a ramen burger before this challenge ends.
Oh, shiz.
There's not many days left, but I still have a ton of ideas. Oiled up a spatula and gently placed it in some hot oil. This took a while longer than expected to cook, even though I had it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. In hindsight, I should have added more oil so I didn't have to worry about flipping it and breaking it. So pancake number 1 doesn't look too bad. For pancake number 2, I added more oil so the whole thing could be submerged. Things were going great until they weren't. The pancake popped and then it looked like hundreds of little baby pancakes were coming out of the hole. And I'm like, yo, what are you doing? And of course I got no reply. I just decided to take it out because it was deflated at that point. It was so bad that the police siren started going off. Anyway, on the last one, I was over it and I just wanted to see what would happen if I fried it in a ball shape. And once I put it in the oil, I realized it would just be quicker to cook if I flattened it. And somehow, this one turned out looking the best. It was the easiest to cook, it didn't burst open and drop its babies everywhere, and I was pretty happy with it. So here's pancake number 1. We don't talk about pancake number 2. And here's pancake number 3. I had them on the wire rack for about 10 minutes and they were still quite oily, so next time I'll use paper towels. I couldn't tell if pancake number 1 was done, but I took a bite and it was okay. Just tasted like something fried and it was very crispy. Pancake number 3 looked bland, but it looked the best out of the 3. I mean, the 2. And it tasted the best. The mashed potato interior stayed intact while providing a crunchy outside. I bet this would be good with some cheese and some more noodles as well. I added some sour cream, which was a nice touch. What do you think I should have done to make this better? Today is day 22 and a half of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to reattempt the ramen potato pancake. I got a ton of great suggestions from you all, so thank you for that. I've got some leftover mochi mashed potatoes seasoned with tonkatsu instant ramen flavoring from day 22. For the noodles, I'm going to use these habanero spicy chicken flavor ones. Can't go wrong with spicy ramen and potatoes. Besides the noodle change, I'm also adding a slice of cheese. Noodles are in, and I didn't quite think this part all the way through, but I figured it out and form the whole thing into a ball without any casualties. Here are my 2 balls in case one goes bad. I'm just going to keep it simple and try to pan fry it in a non-stick skillet. I sprayed it with some oil and just kept it on medium heat. Then I smashed it down and made it all compact. As much as I wanted to flip this thing, I knew it wasn't ready. But about 8 minutes in, I decided to go for it.
Oh yeah, let's go.
I let that side cook for 6 minutes and then plated it. I liked how this side looked better. I burned my tongue on this and my fingers, but it was worth it. It was dang good. This was how I was envisioning it would look yesterday. Today is day 22.75 of my instant ramen challenge, and since I have one ramen potato ball left, I figured I'd throw it in the air fryer to see what happens. I sprayed the tray and potato ball with olive oil and put it in for 10 minutes at 390 degrees Fahrenheit. After the full 10 minutes, this is how it looks. The bottom got attached, so next time parchment paper or foil should help. So, not too bad looking. It developed a nice crust on the outside. The instant ramen looks like spaghetti inside. You've got habanero spicy chicken noodles with Colby Jack cheese encased in potato mochi. It was okay, but I would have preferred to fry this in oil. It didn't have the savory, oily taste that I was wanting, if that makes sense. I guess I could have tried 400 degrees as well to develop a better crust. Today is day 23 of my instant ramen challenge, and it's starting off with a bit of a fail. You see, what had happened was that I threw this bitter melon in the freezer because I wasn't ready to cook it yet. But when I took it out, it was all mushy because this thing has a ton of water content. So the first thing I did was attempt to draw out the water by cutting it up into chunks and then removing the insides. But that wasn't really working, so I sliced it up into smaller pieces, thinking it would just be better this way. Once I had that sliced up and the insides removed, I added some more salt and gave it a toss, and into the fridge it went until the next morning. It was still looking quite plump, so I decided to salt it just a little bit more and put it on a wire rack. Just going to leave this on the counter until I'm ready to cook it in a few hours. You might be wondering what the heck I'm trying to make, and it all started with these tofu shirataki noodles that I got on the ice cream day. I only bought it because I wanted the spicy miso seasoning. Well, I tried one of the packages of the noodles, and the first thing it reminded me of were of glass noodles, which is used in a variety of dishes, but bitter melon soup came to mind first. So I asked my mom to send me her recipe, and she sent me some videos that I'm basing this recipe off of. I gave the noodles a few good rinses and cut them up. Next, I rehydrated some dried black fungus, aka wood ear mushrooms. Just put it in warm water. Diced up half a yellow onion, and this is how the mushrooms look after 15 minutes. Just roughly chopped those up. Next was preparing the filling. My mom didn't give me specific measurements. She was like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, so I'm just kind of guesstimating. Also, shout out to my neighbor for gifting me a box of gloves for Christmas. A pound of ground pork, the noodles, about half the mushrooms, and the yellow onion. While I mixed that up, I realized I should have cut the noodles more, so I kind of alternated between mixing and cutting. For seasoning, I added a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of sugar, and I also have this instant ramen seasoning packet from one of the days last week. I think it's slightly spicy and tangy. Gave that all a good mix and then went to stuffing the bitter melon slices. Obviously, they should have been bigger so I could stuff them better, but you can't unslice things, so I learned my lesson for next time. 9 years later, I was done stuffing them all, and afterwards I realized I forgot to add fish sauce to the meat. Just don't tell my mom. everything is fine. Oil in my Dutch oven pan on medium-high heat and placing the pieces in. My goal is to brown it a little bit to get some extra flavor in the broth, and it sounds cool to say I browned the meat. It just sounds like something a chef would say, you know? There were some pieces that didn't make the browning cut, but I didn't want to leave them out. I'm adding some veggie broth instead of water since I had a bottle in the pantry, and for the seasoning, I'm going to use the packet from these mama noodles. I just gently mixed it in because I didn't want to disturb the meat and pop it out of the bitter melon socket. Let it simmer, cover, and this is how it looks 30 minutes later. That time frame wasn't part of the instructions, it's just how long it took me to do the frickin' dishes. So the meat has kind of separated from the melon, but pretty much staying intact. Looks pretty good. I cooked up the noodles, and I totally forgot this package has another packet inside. I really should know better because I used to eat the shrimp version of these noodles all the time. After I fished that out and realized I have yet another packet to figure out how to use up, I added the broth to the drained noodles. This video wasn't supposed to be this long, but I just wanted to walk through my thought process with you all, by the way. I garnished with some chopped green onions, and this is the final product. The broth was extremely bitter. Maybe it's because I haven't had it in a while, or I just didn't cook it like how my mom does. I guess I grew up eating it with rice, which helped. The noodles for sure did. I enjoyed the flavor of the broth since it was pretty rich. The bitter melon was even more bitter than the broth, and it was just a tad bit too salty, and I mean, I'm to blame for that for my attempt at drawing out the water. Overall, I'm happy with how it turned out. It makes me feel less intimidated cooking this vegetable. I also felt very healthy eating it. Today is day 24 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try and make ramen-filled takoyaki. I saw the flour at the store, and it looked pretty simple to make. This video is a bit special since my nephews decided to partake. Going to use these Vietnamese hot sour shrimp noodles, and I also picked up an electric cooker. It calls for 4 ounces of the flour, 2 eggs minus the eggshells, and 12 ounces of water. The consistency seemed a bit too thin, so I added some more of the flour. Also, these noodles are typically supposed to be in broth, but I'll be making them dry.
Why are you putting noodles in that?
It's a challenge. It's a ramen challenge.
I had my nephews help me add the green onions, and they just loved putting it all in one place. Then they added the toppings as fillings, so basically I learned to keep everything out of reach until it's ready to go in. I flipped each one, which took a little bit of practice, but got easier towards the end. My nephews were just screaming with amazement after I flipped each one. I topped them with Kewpie mayo, bonito flakes, and seaweed flakes. So these aren't the prettiest, but I had a blast making them with my nephews, and taste-wise, they were pretty good. I'd like to add meat or additional fillings next time when things are a bit less hectic. Today is day 25 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to redo one of the days from last year with a bit of a change. My brother called me and said, "Hey, I'm smoking briskets all day. You want to come over?" I said, "Sure, I've got nothing better to do. Plus, I got to return his A5 Wagyu that I borrowed." When I came over, he had some sliced brisket marinated in Lao seasoning, and one was in the smoker getting ready to get wrapped. If you remember from last year, I smoked some noodles in my friend Tyler's smoker and ate it with his barbecue. This year, I'm going to borrow my brother's smoker and smoke these Momofuku noodles. The change I'm making is that I'm adding the seasoning packet before I smoke it so that I can adhere to the noodles more. Even though I could taste the smokiness last year, it wasn't as much as I'd liked it to be. I'm cooking the noodles about 70% of the way because they'll continue cooking in the smoker. Drained them and then added the liquid seasoning packets. Made a little foil boat for the noodles. Got my brother's A5, and it was game time. I moved my brother's brisket to the side since it didn't really seem that important, and then I placed the noodle boat in along with the steak. The temp in this thing is about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and I checked on it after 5 minutes. The A5 is pretty thin, so it didn't need long. Flipped the steak and mixed the noodles, and just closed it for a few more minutes. The noodles felt done, so I brought everything inside. They were kind of dry, but much better once I mixed it up since there was still sauce at the bottom. I sliced the Wagyu to top off the noodles, sprinkled green onion for color, sesame seeds to make it look fancier, and one last touch, instant ramen seasoning for the steak. Just a little sprinkle on the A5. And there you have it, smoked instant ramen with A5 Wagyu. Now the true test, does it taste smoky? And the answer is 100% yes, much more so than last year. I don't know if it's because of the smaller smoker that was more condensed, or adding the seasoning before smoking, but man, am I happy with how this turned out. Today is day 26 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to attempt to make ramen bread using Janelle's pan de sal recipe. I've never even made bread before, so let's see how this goes. I'm using these Maggi noodles since I have a 5-pack of it, and I just need the noodle portion. I blitzed them up, and my game plan is to substitute a portion of the flour with the instant ramen dust, which came out to be 134 grams. I poured the flour into my stand mixer along with the ramen dust, active yeast, salt on the other side, and some sugar. Once the dry ingredients were mixed, which I realized I could have just used the spatula the entire time, I added eggs and warm milk. I let the machine do its job while I slowly poured in the rest of the milk. Then I added butter and continued letting it knead at medium speed, and I let that run for about 10 minutes. Formed it into a ball, covered, and I'm going to let that sit for an hour. The recipe calls for cream crackers, so I'll be using these chocolate ones that spoke to me at the grocery store. I just blitzed them up as well. Looking back, I wish I had tried one of the cookies before that, but oh well, just another excuse for me to go back and get some more. This bread pan is another purchase I made last year because I was being overly ambitious, but I never used. I tried lining it up with parchment paper, but I wasn't patient enough for that to work out, so I just sprayed it with oil. The bread dough didn't look too bad, so I pulled it out onto a floured surface. The instructions were to push out the air bubbles, which I didn't feel any, so I was getting a little worried. Then I just threw it into the bread pan and spread it out, topped it off with the cookie crumbles. I covered it, and this is how it looks after 2.5 hours. I think it's supposed to rise a bit more, but it was late and I needed my beauty sleep, so I put it in the fridge. Here's how it looks when I pulled it out the next morning, and here it is 5 hours later. I think this may be the most it will rise, so I'm just going to go ahead and cook it. I threw it in the oven, and then I remembered that it came with a lid, so I took it back out, put the lid on, and back in it goes. After 25 minutes, it didn't look or feel quite done, so I put it back in for 10 more minutes. I read online that it's supposed to be at 190 degrees Fahrenheit, so I just baked it until it got to that point. And here's how it turned out. I let it cool down for 10 minutes, and the entire time I was taking pictures and sending them to my family and friends to show off the bread. I didn't even know how it was going to turn out.
It just fell out. I'm like nervous. Whoa, look at that.
I mean, the fact that this thing even looks like bread is bonkers to me. I figured I'd mess it up or something. I sliced into the bread and it was dense as heck, but it was sturdy. Taste-wise, it's not as good as the pan de sal that Janelle makes, but it was still a sweet, tasty bread. I ended up eating 4 slices of it in one sitting. The entire time, just in awe that I didn't mess it up. Today is day 26 and a quarter of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to try and make fried ramen grilled cheese sandwich using the ramen bread I made yesterday. I typically do a ramen grilled cheese each year, and the idea to fry it came to me while I was making egg rolls. I knew I was going to have the egg roll wrapper left over, so I thought, why not? Buttered the bread slices, put them in a low heat nonstick pan, and added American cheese, Munster cheese, and smoked Gouda. I'll be using these Maggi noodles for the filling. I haven't tried it with a seasoning packet yet since I just used the noodles in the bread yesterday. They've got a great smell to them. I went ahead and peeled a couple of egg roll wrappers since it takes 10 years to heat a grilled cheese. Once the cheese was about halfway melted, I added the instant ramen. Grilled cheese was done, and then I had some technical difficulties. I wasn't quite sure how to wrap this. I knew it needed to be closed completely in order to fry with a crispy shell, but the sandwich was too big. I tried it with both of the sheets and just couldn't figure it out. At this point, I decided to give up on trying to fry it, but then I realized I could just cut it into a smaller sandwich. It's like a baby sandwich, and even though I'm sick of Christmas wrapping, I had to cut it and wrap it like one. I sealed it all up with egg whites, and this took longer than I care to admit. I dropped it in hot oil and fried it until it was nice golden brown. The smoked Gouda didn't quite melt, and the noodle ratio was lopsided, but doesn't look too bad. Taste-wise, it was okay. I'm not really digging these noodles in this combo. The crispy factor is there, crunch on crunch. Overall, not bad, but not worth all that trouble. Today is day 26 and a half of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm making a ramen grilled cheese again, but without frying it. I cut a couple of slices of my ramen bread and buttered them up, and I have found that the best noodles for a grilled cheese are the Samyang spicy ones. They're just the perfect pairing for the cheese. Like yesterday, I'll be using Munster cheese, American cheese, and smoked Gouda. A splash of water in the pan and covering it so the steam can help melt the cheese. The Gouda doesn't melt that well, but I don't want to waste it. While I make the noodles, I need to ask. So I have a few days left in the challenge, but I have a ton of more ideas. Should I make this challenge a week longer or save the ideas for next year? Let me know in the comments. The cheese was mostly melted, so I added the spicy noodles and then closed the sandwich. And there you have it, a spicy ramen grilled cheese made with ramen bread. Much better with this type of noodle. Sweet bread, spicy ramen, and a buttload of cheese. My belly is happy. Today is day 26.75 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to make a ramen avocado toast using a horribly cut slice of ramen bread. Threw that into the toaster, and I will be using the seasoning packets from the salted egg instant ramen that I picked up in Thailand. And I know this avocado doesn't look the best, but they're left over from a lime experiment I was running. They're still good, unless appearance is a big thing to you. Then that sucks. To the avocado, I'm adding the oil packet and mashing it all up. I've got my ramen bread toast and just applying the avocado mash mash, and the salted egg seasoning packet. And one last ingredient to tie this all together, salted egg Lay's chips. This will provide an extra salty crunch to the creamy avocado. This was actually pretty tasty. I did add more of the seasoning packet since I couldn't taste it that much, but the savoriness of the salted egg just paired so well with the sweet bread and avocado. If you're wondering, I will be extending this challenge for another week. Sorry if you're sick of the ramen videos. Today is day 26.9 of my ramen challenge, and I'm going to make a double smoked bacon, cheddar, and egg sandwich using ramen bread. When I was making it, I stole off a little piece, rolled it into a ball, and saved it until this moment. I bought double smoked bacon on a whim, and when I googled it, a sandwich from a popular coffee chain popped up. I haven't had it, but I'm replicating the sandwich off how it looks. The bread, dough, and bacon go onto a baking sheet and into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. In the meantime, I'm cooking up an egg, and in the pictures you see the white and yolk part mixed up, so I'm just trying to make it look like that. This is after 15 minutes and not quite done yet, so back in it goes. And it was done about 10 minutes later. Bacon looked good to me, but you can leave it in longer if you want it crispier. I placed a slice of American cheese on the warm bacon so it can melt a little bit, sliced the bread, buttered, and toasted it up. Egg, black pepper, bacon, and cheese. Almost too beautiful to eat. It was a great sandwich. I'm starting to think that sweet bread goes with almost everything. Today is day 26.95 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm down to the last bit of my ramen bread. I'm going to toast it hard and put it in a ramen truffle to see if it will provide little crunchy bits. For the noodles, I'm using Bachelor Super Noodles, bacon flavored. Seems like it would go well with eggs. It says it's the nation's favorite. For those of you who live in that nation, do you believe that's true? Now I'm prepping all the ingredients to toss into the waffle maker. A couple of eggs, the last few slices of Colby Jack cheese that I have, and the partially burnt toast since the cuts were uneven. Cheese, eggs, tore up bits of the toast, noodles, bacon seasoning, a little more toast, and cheese. Panicked for a bit because the waffle maker started sputtering, but everything worked out. Definitely could be crispier, but appearance-wise doesn't look too bad. The bread lost its crispiness, probably because the egg rehydrated it or something. Taste-wise, it was bland, and I thought I was pretty heavy-handed with the seasoning packet, but hot sauce came in to save the day. I'd definitely make this again with some minor changes. Today is day 27 of my instant ramen challenge, and I will be trying James's favorite instant ramen. This wasn't planned, but he stopped by to drop off a bag of goodies. It included his favorite ramen packet and a bunch of different toppings. He knows me well and wrote down instructions. I haven't tried these spicy seafood noodles yet, but if the packaging is any indication, it looks like it's going to be delicious. So step 1 was add Napa cabbage and onion to boiling water, then the noodles, which I almost dropped in the oil packet as well. Step 2 was adding a mixture of Spam, meatballs, and hot dogs, kimchi, minced garlic, and then he said to go light on the soy sauce. Last step was to add an egg and some butter, which I think is a first for me, coconut milk, sesame oil, and a slice of cheese, and lettuce and green onions. And this is where I tested the limits of this ramen bowl. It was definitely up to the test. I'll have to say, this is the creamiest instant ramen broth I've had. Definitely a 10 out of 10 for me. Who knew adding a gazillion ingredients could make something so good? Today is day 27.75 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'll be making rice paper ramen pizza, aka banjang noong. I started a non-stick skillet on low heat, added rice paper, and grated some of the instant ramen compound butter from day 27.25. Some chopped green onions, chili oil, and cracked an egg, which I mixed with all the other toppings I had already laid down. I upped the temp to just under medium at this point so the egg could cook more quickly. Then for the noodles, I'm using these purple wheat chili and lime ones. I used these dry when I did the ramen trail mix. Instead of buying hot dogs, I'm using leftover bologna that I cut up, some fried garlic, Kewpie mayo, and sriracha. I realized I was going to fold this in half, so I moved some of the ingredients to make it easier. I turned up the heat to a little over medium and cooked each side for a couple of minutes until it was crispy. This turned out very good with lots of different textures and flavors. Before I started this, I was thinking a cheesy, spicy ramen would be better, but this chili lime one made everything brighter and more refreshing, especially against the savory ingredients. Today is day 28 of my instant ramen challenge, and I'm going to make a ramen burger. I know, you all are getting tired of the challenge, but just a few more days. I'm going to use 2 packages of the Indomie noodles, and this year I'm going to fry the buns so that they can hold together better. In a bowl, I'm combining all the liquid sauce packets with 1 egg. I'm hoping this will help bind the noodles together. My problem last year is that when I introduced heat and tried to pan-sear the buns, the noodles broke apart. I'm also going to make the buns thinner and wider so there's more surface area once I fry it. Sprayed a wide-based bowl that will act as my bun mold, and then I added some of the noodles. Pressed down on each one one with some plastic wrap, putting some random stuff I have around the house to weigh it down before I put it in the fridge. For the patty, I'm using some red Wagyu that I bought at the farmer's market, seasoning with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and both of the dry Indomie seasoning packets. Mixed that up and then added some cubes of ghost pepper cheddar. This is how the ramen buns look after 4 hours. They did not just plop out like I thought they would. It took a little persuasion with a spatula. I was not panicking at all. I mean, just a little bit. I fried each one and managed not to burn down my kitchen. Each one took about 5 minutes with the flip halfway through. I cooked the patty to a medium in my carbon steel skillet, and for the heck of it, I added a slice of hot habanero cheese. Instant ramen bun, patty with cheese on cheese, and another ramen bun. The buns held together really well, and I'm happy with how this turned out. It was overly rich in savoriness, so next time I'd balance it with some pickles, maybe lettuce and tomato. The buns were crispy on the outside, yet kept its elasticity. That is a hard word to say. Elasticity. Why is that word so hard? And chewiness. I think another thing I could even try is adding cheese in the noodles so it would melt as I fry it. Today is day 30 of my instant ramen challenge featuring building my spice tolerance, and I made a lasagna inspired ramen dish. I don't know what to call it, but I just know it's gonna be really spicy. I just thought it would be a great idea to throw in the spice tolerance series on the last day. I combined chopped onion and some of the ground beef mixture from the burger day. For the heck of it, I added some of this Reaper seasoning and rub. Just browned up the meat and then added some tomato sauce. For the noodles, I'm finally using the 3 times spicy noodles. I picked these up in a random grocery store in Mexico City last year. To combat the heat, I'm going to try a suggestion from a follower. 1 spoon of curd with 1 teaspoon of sugar and some sliced onion. This was the only pan I had to use, and since I wanted as many layers as possible, I split it with some foil. Sauce mixture, 3 times spicy noodles, ricotta cheese, more of the sauce, noodles, ricotta cheese, sauce, and more noodles. And making a surprise appearance are these ghost pepper chips I got from Thailand. They look deadly, but YOLO. I topped it off with a slice of habanero cheese.
Oof, the fumes just burned my eyes.
Oh gosh, my eyes.
My eyes survived the ordeal, and it was time to try the creation.
The chips have basically got soggy, which, dang, I was hoping for a crunch. You know, I'm gonna go for a small bite first. I did say I wanna go into this like quick, but not that quick. Yep, okay. Spice, but good spice so far. The heat level on this, I would say, out of 10, this would be like 7.5 to 8. 10 being when I tried the noodles with the chili flakes. It's more like a spaghetti bake thing. But you know what? Give this a try. They're not that bad. 30 days of ramen. I want to thank you all for watching. I think it ended up being like 40 plus days, but I think towards the end, a lot of people started getting bored. I had fun like trying to figure out different things, and I just wanted to keep going. So thank you to everyone who stuck with it. My nose is running. Eyes are a little teary, but not too bad. I enjoyed this year very much because I feel like I tested a little bit more in the kitchen, and my success rate was much higher than last year or the year before. But I still have so many ideas, but I knew I was like, I just gotta cut it off this year because it's getting out of control. But next year, I'll be back with another one. Hope you guys all enjoyed this challenge, and I hope it gave you like ideas on what to make with ramen. I'll probably do a recap video once my brain cools down, once my mouth cools down. Just kidding, don't say bye yet. Let's give this a try. I almost forgot I put sugar in this. It does help cool it down. The onions are an interesting touch, but I like it. But yeah, bye everyone.
These are my thoughts on my third annual 30-day instant ramen challenge, which actually ended up being a total of 45 days. First of all, I did not expect for it to be this many days. It kind of just happened, and there were some ideas that I just had to try. Secondly, I felt like this year went a bit smoother than the past 2 years. I think I'm getting just a little bit better at figuring out what things may work together. My cooking intuition is also improving. Obviously, I still have a lot to learn. And lastly, I hope you all enjoyed this challenge. Each year, I forget how fun it is to mess around in the kitchen with some instant ramen, and it's even more fun when you're all sharing your thoughts with me. In my notepad, I still have like 15 ideas that I'll probably try throughout the year. I also apologize to people who are suggesting every day that I try a certain recipe and I never got around to it. But again, big thank you to everyone for watching, and I'll see you again for this challenge next year.